So hey guys, and welcome to this vlog. Today's vlog, we're going to talk about setting up a working directory. We're going to talk about entering data into SPSS, and then we're going to talk about conducting a little bit of data management so that we can use our findings later on. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to create your working directory. So here I'm working in a Mac, but if you're working in a Windows system, then the procedure for creating a working directory is largely the same. So all we really want to do is go to our Sociology 305 folder, and then somewhere within there, create a folder titled Working Directory. So here you can see I've already got one. And here I'm going to put all of my data analysis files in this directory. So as you start working with data, you're going to create a lot of different files, so it's really important that you organize them. So you want to have a folder where you keep everything, and you also want to make sure that whatever you name your files is clear, so that when you need those files later on, you don't have to open them all up to figure out what's inside them. So here we have a working directory. After we've created this working directory, the next thing we want to do is start entering our data into SPSS. So go ahead and open up SPSS. Now the first thing you see when you open up SPSS is this window here. So this is the Welcome to IBM SPS Statistics window. Now in this course, we're not going to use any of these features, so when you see this window, what you can do is just X out of it. What we're really interested in though is this window here, which is the IBM SPSS Data Editor. This editor has two main interfaces. So if you're working in Windows, you'll see two tabs in the bottom left-hand corner. If you're working in a Mac, you'll see what I'm seeing here, which is two buttons. So these involve the Data View tab as well as the Variable View tab. So the Data View tab contains something that looks like a spreadsheet. Here we can see a number of different rows as well as a number of different columns. So the way SPSS manages data is that every analytical unit, so in our case, the students who responded to the Fear of Crime survey, they're going to get their own row, and then all of the responses that the students made are going to go in the columns. So you can think of each column as being a separate variable. So to start entering our data, what we want to do is we want to lower this window so that we can see it, but at the same time we can see all of our survey responses. So here I have the Campus Fear of Crime survey, and each survey represents one student on campus, and every student was asked to respond to a number of different questions. So all we're doing is we're taking those responses and we're entering them into the SPSS spreadsheet. So for this first row, what I do is I can click on the first cell, and then I can enter in the first value that I see. So the answer to this first question, so 1A, was an agree, which in this course is coded as a 1. So as part of this survey, different students on campus were asked to rate their safety feeling around campus. So students were asked, I feel safe walking alone on campus after dark, and they were then asked to respond with either a strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. So when it comes to analyzing responses of this type, what we typically do is we don't use the words themselves. So instead of saying agree, in this case what we do is we enter in a 1. So we enter a 1 for the first question, a 2 for the second, a 0 for the third, a 2 for the fourth. Continue in this process until we've entered in all of the responses to the survey. Now notice here when it comes to the how often do you worry about question, instead of having numbers that go from 2 to -2, we have numbers that go from 4 all the way down to 0. So 0 indicates that people never worry about, in this case, having their home broken into, while a 1 would indicate rarely, 2 sometimes, 3 very often, and 4 indicating always. So we go ahead and we take these values and we also enter them into SPSS. Now, another question that was asked as part of the Campus Fear of Crime survey was whether or not the student responding had had any previous experience being the victim of crime. So if students were the victim of crime in the past, then they would report a 1. If not, then they would report a 0. Students were also asked to identify their academic class standing, their gender identity, as well as their racial/ethnic identity. So in total, there were 19 different questions asked of the students who took the survey. And if the person taking the survey did everything correctly, then there should be 19 different answers reported. Now, if somebody failed to report an answer, so if you look at the response categories and you see that there was a blank, then what we do is we either leave that space blank or we replace it with a period sign. Okay, so that's how you enter data values into SPSS. So with the rest of this assignment, go through the survey and continue in this fashion, entering in values for the other surveys. Now the second part of this assignment is to start creating your codebook. So when it comes to working with software, that software is often going to do things by default, things that we don't actually want it to do. So you should never trust software, and that it's always worth looking at what the software is doing and making any corrections that need to be made. So what we want to do is if we click on this variable view tab, we're going to see another spreadsheet like window. And what this spreadsheet shows us are information about all of our variables. So remember, we had 19 columns of information, and here we have 19 rows of information. So each row tells us something about the responses that were made within each of those 19 columns. So if we will look at this first column here, this one titled name, we see that there are a number of values that have already been entered into it. So the first one is var 00001, the second one is var 00002, and so forth, all the way down to var 00019. So when we start entering data into SPSS, by default what it does is it creates names for each of the different columns of data that we enter. By default, these values can be used to do all kinds of analyses. However, when it comes to actually using these values and doing analyses, these default values are often really hard to read. And by hard to read, what I'm saying is that if I see var 0001, I don't actually know what question I'm really looking at. So because we never trust the software, what we want to do is replace all of these default values with values that are more intuitive. So if we go back to the original survey, we can see that there's a whole class of questions that have to do with safety feeling. And then we have a number of different sub parts that talk about different locations and time periods. So what we can do is we can replace the var 0001 with, here I'm going to use the letters SF for safety feeling, and then an underscore, and then I'm going to type in the words campus after dark. So campus after dark. So what you can see is now I've replaced that default variable name with something that's a little more intuitive. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for all the other variables. So SF campus during day. So that's going to replace var 0002. So then for the second question, So this set of questions asked people how worried they were about different types of crime. So here I might replace the default value of var 00009 with something like FOC for fear of crime, and then home broken into. I can then replace var 00010 with FOC robbed. So I'm going to continue in this fashion for all of the other questions that were asked. Now, if we look at the variable names we just entered, we recognize that they give us a lot of information about the questions that were asked. However, they're still a little bit cryptic. So what we can do is we can provide even more information describing what these variables are apparently showing us by putting in information in this label column. So you can think of the label column as another way to name the column, but to do it in a way where you're free to enter in a lot more information. So here, instead of entering SF, campus after dark, we can type in safety feeling on campus after dark. So here we're able to take that cryptic code, which is a little more meaningful than the default, and really spell out what it is that this variable was measuring. So I can do this again. So safety feeling on campus during the day. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for all of the 19 variables. Okay, so we've done that. So we've taken all of those empty labels and we filled them in with information about our 19 different variables. So if we click on the Data View tab, one thing we can see is that all of the columns, all of the names have been replaced. So all those default names have been replaced with the ones that we've provided. We can then go back to the Variable View tab. We can see information about that column. So here's the column name, and here's the label explaining in greater detail what that column name is supposed to represent. Okay, so we've now done all of this work to enter our survey responses into SPSS. So to save your work in SPSS, you go up to this upper left-hand corner, and there's a image of a disk. So click Save, and then you want to save this in your working directory folder. So you might have to navigate to get to the folder, but once you're there, you want to give your database a meaningful name. So you could call yours something like SOC 305 Summer 2019 Campus Fear of Crime Database. So this lets you know what course it was for, when you took the course, and also what information is contained within the file. So we click Save. And once you've clicked Save, you'll get this window will pop up. This is the IBM SPSS Statistics Viewer. So when you use SPSS, you're going to issue commands such as saving a file or running some kind of statistical routine. And every time you execute that routine, SPSS is going to give you some kind of information about how it worked. So that information is going to appear in this statistics viewer. So here we get a bunch of syntax, and all the syntax is doing is telling us that we saved our file, and when we look at the syntax, we're not getting any warning messages telling us that something went wrong. Okay, so that's it for today. So we've saved our file, so we can now X out of SPSS. So we click on the X here. SPSS is going to give you this dialog box asking if you want to save the information that's in this output window, and you can just click No. And then you can X out of the data editor, and it'll ask you again if you want to save all your information. So you've already saved your information. So you're safe. So what you can do is say yes to the idea of closing out SPSS. Okay, so that's it. See you in the next video.